if you wouldn't mind as well, just muting your mic just while I'm talking. And then if you've any questions or anything, you can put up your hand, or we can have some time for questions at the end as well. Thank you. Okay, so yeah, so welcome to Supporting Children with Physical Needs in Mainstream Settings. So the aims of the presentation today are to be able to identify and address the barriers surrounding inclusion for children with physical needs when accessing mainstream learning environments. I'd like you to have a more in-depth knowledge about creating an inclusive culture within your school, setting to influence attitudes towards physical disability. I'd like you to have a broader understanding of physical conditions and be able to consider issues around environmental and curricular access. I'd like you to have knowledge surrounding making reasonable adjustments within your setting, and have an increased awareness of surrounding health and safety issues and manual handling needs when caring for children with physical needs in mainstream settings. And also to understand the role of professionals involved with these children. Just to get an idea actually of who's in the training today, are you guys Senkos or teachers? If you don't want to chat, that's fine. You can just pop it in the chat. But yeah, just so I know in terms of what kind of things we can be talking about today. Senko teacher. Okay, perfect. Early years, perfect. Okay. Hi, Anne-Marie. I think you just joined. Just so you know, I'm just recording this session, and we're just putting in the chat your role and where you're based, and just so I can get an idea of you know, what to kind of advise today and things like that. And so we've got some early years settings, early years teachers, assistant head, and Senkos. Okay, perfect. And if you wouldn't mind as well, just muting your mic and just to interferes with the background. That's great, thank you. Okay. Okay, so every child is unique, but physical disability is likely to come from a physical or neurological condition. So that's things like cerebral palsy, epilepsy. It could be a degenerative condition as well. So that's where the tissues or organs changes for the worse over time. So that could be a condition called muscular dystrophy. So that's a muscle wasting condition. They could have a genetic or chromosomal condition, so perhaps Down syndrome. It could be due to trauma, you know, maybe as a result of maybe an accident or an amputation or a serious illness. They may have a physical disability due to an acquired brain injury, or they may have complex medical needs which impact upon their function. Okay, so physical disability can be varied, and so they might have a profound and multiple disability. They may use a powered wheelchair or a self-propelled wheelchair to get around, or both. Sometimes they use both. And they might have a handheld mobility device, so maybe a walking stick or a walking frame. They may actually be mobile with support, so they just might need a little bit of kind of like handheld support just to keep them stable. Or they might be independently mobile, so they might have a hidden physical disability, which we'll discuss in the next slide. Okay, so hidden disabilities. So generally, you know, seeing a person in a wheelchair or wearing a hearing aid or carrying a white cane tells us that a person may be disabled. But what about, you know, invisible disabilities that still make daily living a bit more difficult? So these can include illnesses such as perhaps renal failure, diabetes, sleep disorders, chronic fatigue or pain, maybe partial sight loss, hearing loss, or asthma. So it's important just to be mindful of these as well. So, thinking about the rates of children with physical disabilities in education. So, it's estimated that one child in every 250 births has a physical disability. So, I guess that means that the majority of schools will have at least one child with a physical disability at any one time. Um, so, how many? Oh, sorry. So, how many of your settings currently have a child with a physical disability in your role? You can just pop it in the chat if you know, or if you don't have any, maybe just let me know. Yeah, just so I can get an idea. Um, that would be great. Okay, so you will have two next year. Yeah, you don't currently have any. Okay, three approximately. Tricky because I'm thinking about the hidden ones. Yeah, that's true. Some children have OT input due to sensory sensitivities affecting their eating and fine motor skills. Yeah, exactly. So those kind of sensory impairments are really physical impairments as well. One diabetes and one unable to walk. Not sure of specifics yet. Yeah, two children. Okay, so yeah, so it can be varied in different schools, and obviously it depends on your numbers. But it's really great that you're attending the training today because we're really trying to support schools with these children. Um, one brittle bone, one degenerative, one neobladder, and one diabetes. Okay, yeah. Okay, that's great. Thanks, guys, for that information. Okay, so thinking about the impact of physical disability. So whilst every, child, as they're affected by their unique physical needs, they're all affected in different ways. But they may have difficulty in areas like, accessing the physical environment. So for many children with physical disabilities, the inaccessibility of the buildings and surroundings can really limit their involvement in school activities. So we need to think about creating, a physically accessible environment that is not mobility limited. So that could involve, the provision of maybe lifts, ramps, rails, perhaps an accessible toilet, or changing facilities. Thinking about taking part in active learning activities. So, a child with a physical impairment may have difficulty in managing, the distance between different learning activities, and perhaps with maybe carrying materials, or even like recording their work, and they may take a lot longer to answer or ask questions. In terms of their self-care skills, so I guess, some of the children they might be unable to feed themselves, due to delayed fine motor skills, so like their hand in their hands, and they may struggle to get dressed due to perhaps difficulties with their range of movement in their limbs, so perhaps their legs or their arms, or they might have balance difficulties, or they might actually struggle to use standard feeding utensils because of their grip and things like that. And they may actually have difficulties with things like eating or swallowing, or even like sensory impairments. So perhaps tolerating certain foods might be quite difficult for them. Um, okay, thinking about mark making and recording their ideas. So some children might be physically unable to hold a pen or write, or even for, maybe even short periods of time. They might even, complain of fatigue. And they might experience challenges with information processing. So you might have to consider using perhaps like adapted writing tools, perhaps the use of assistive technology, or the use of speech to text software. So the child can speak, and then it kind of comes up on the computer, so they don't actually have to type it. And if their fine motor skills are quite impaired, that might be helpful. Um, they might have difficulty managing their fatigue and their pain. So it's important that we give these children, rest breaks, or perhaps extended deadlines for exams or homework. So yeah, that might be required. They might also have difficulty interacting socially. So sometimes children with physical disabilities, they might feel a little bit excluded, during like group activities, as they might have difficulty, moving around the classroom. So just make sure that the child is always kind of included with others when you're forming groups and things like that. Sorry, I'm just checking the chat. We use Clicker for poor muscle development. Yeah, that's really, really great. I think not a lot of schools are using that, so it's really a great software. Okay, so the assessment. So if you are perhaps a SENCO in a school and you have a child with a physical disability starting soon, I'm just going to go through the assessment process. Okay, so when to assess? So when a child has a diagnosis of a physical disability, assessment should be before they start at their new setting. So if a child does not have a diagnosis, but their physical development begins to give a cause for concern, assessment of their needs should begin as soon as possible. Okay, so to do that, it's important to kind of, organize a meeting with the parents to discuss the concerns they might have or that you might have as a school. So this is also a good opportunity for you to offer, kind of like a welcoming and positive attitude towards inclusion so the child feels fully part of the school. Encourage parents to share existing information. So whether that's, reports from the GP, medical or therapy reports, or a progress check from the health visitor, because the more information you have, the more you're going to be able to understand the child's needs and make any adjustments required. This would also be a good time for you to review the physical development of a child according to the early years foundation stage, which includes, seeing if they have good control and coordination in large and small movements, seeing if they can confidently move in a range of ways, including safely negotiating their space, and seeing if they can handle equipment and tools effectively, including pencils for writing. And it would also be good if you could complete some observations of the child, if that's possible, before or when they initially start as well. Okay, so taking action. So children with physical disabilities may require support from professionals, including, but not restricted to, health visitors, occupational therapists, physiotherapists, speech and language therapists, educational psychologists and specialist teachers. So yeah, there tends to be a variety of professionals involved. And obviously the more complex needs the children have tends to have more kind of professional input. Try to become familiar with the local offer to locate sources of advice and support. These professionals can support by providing strategies for achieving learning outcomes and advising on reasonable adjustments and equipment. And the decision to involve these professionals should be taken with the child's parents. So yeah, before, if you're thinking about, making a referral, always do speak with the parents, to make sure that they're on board and that they consent to that as well. Some parents at the beginning, especially when the child may be going through, the assessment process or they might have a recent diagnosis, it can be a little bit of a sensitive area for parents to accept help and to accept the diagnosis as well. So yeah, just be mindful of that, and yeah, obviously definitely do get their consent before you kind of start making these referrals. So thinking about the voice of the child. Okay, so in their own way, children with physical disabilities should be supported to tell others what matters to them. So they should be enabled to make choices and express their preferences using the most appropriate communication for them. So that might be whether that's them expressing their views, verbally, or through, an assistive communication device. They may also, need help to identify, what they like and what they're good at. Okay, so the review. So children with physical disabilities have ever-changing needs, and the intervention and support requires regular review. And it's important for us to all reflect on how we support children with physical disabilities and how we can improve. So if the child is known to, a variety of professionals like physiotherapists or occupational therapists, if they already have an EHCP, and these professionals are providing input, yeah, it's important that they're kind of, they're regularly reviewed at school, whether that quantification is like on a termly basis, on a half-termly basis, or once per year. It's important that we're kind of having that communication and with the therapists and things like that, and that they're coming in to review the children. Also, if they have their education healthcare plan, they'll have their annual review as well. So you will be kind of continuously reviewing their needs and the support that they need at school. Okay, so now I'm just going to talk in a little bit more detail about some of the kind of the practical actions that you may need to take to support a child who has a physical disability in your setting. So in the SEN Code of Practice, these are known as reasonable adjustments, okay? So reasonable adjustments are a legal obligation according to the Equality Act of 2010. We have to ensure that children with physical disabilities are not at a substantial disadvantage compared to their peers. And it must be anticipatory. So it requires forward thought to be given in advance about what children might need before they start their placement. Okay, so some examples of some reasonable adjustments could be, for example, adjusting the physical environment. So before the child starts, so that might be maybe installing ramps, and maybe even a wet room. It could be modifying the curriculum and assessments. So for example, allowing a student to answer assessments orally or use a computer. Or it might be perhaps even just reducing the distance between classrooms for students who have physical disabilities. And just to say, so for you to determine what is a reasonable adjustment, the education provider should consider factors like obviously the student's disability, and what effect is that adjustment going to have on the student's participation, and their learning outcomes and their level of independence. But also thinking about how that adjustment is going to affect other students and staff. And we also need to be mindful of the cost and the benefits of making the adjustment. Okay, so making reasonable adjustments applies across the whole learning curriculum. So the ones that I'm just going to focus on today from a physical perspective include access and the environment, seating, writing, self-care, routines, and social opportunities. Okay, so looking firstly at the access environment. So yeah, a good place to start is thinking about access and any kind of environmental considerations. So just some of the aspects that may need to be considered include, transport to and from school, entry in and out of school, the ability to move around the environment, classrooms, outside play, and the lunch hall, the toilet, and thinking about extended activities, so trips. So to make your school more accessible, so some reasonable adjustments may include things like, ramps for wheelchairs and perhaps using hoists to help children get out of their wheelchair and onto the toilet. Even ensuring that the doors are wide enough for wheelchairs to pass through. Or perhaps, maybe having handle rails available if the child has some kind of balance and stability and difficulties, or perhaps providing seating in areas such as the playground. Um, and just to say that, like, kind of failure to have that right equipment in place at the right time, it can be usually hugely distressing, I find, for the parents and children. So it really kind of stress the importance of forward planning, because a lot of these adaptations and equipment requests as well, they can take a long time, and you also might have to secure funding, depending on the cost, which could also be an issue. So I would suggest if you have like a child coming in or starting, I'd usually recommend organising perhaps a site inspection or like an access assessment visit of the school, just to ensure that it's kind of fully accessible, and possibly to even complete like an individual access plan for the pupil, and just so I think it's also important to have someone maybe at this visit who has an understanding of the child's condition and how that's going to change over time. Because you as school staff, you mightn't have that understanding. So someone like perhaps an occupational therapist or the physiotherapist can have the insight or the experience to do this. Just going into the chat there. Who would do that? Sorry, yeah. So the occupational therapist or the physiotherapist can help you with that as well. We had Gosh OT to come to assess the school environment. Yeah, that's definitely possible. That's great. I guess it depends also if the child is known to physiotherapy and occupational therapy. If they're not known, then it can be a little bit more. It can be a little bit more tricky to deal with yourself. I guess that's why it's good to get in there and kind of make these referrals quite early. And the manual handling trainer. Yeah, that's really great. That's brilliant. A lot of this, just to say, a lot of times as well. So if a child has like a physical disability and your staff are kind of engaging in any kind of manual handling practice, so things like hoists, personal care, helping with transfers, you as a school kind of have to get in manual handling training as well for your staff. So yeah, that's just something to bear in mind as well. So making sure you have that all in place as well. Okay, so thinking about seating, so some children with physical disabilities are unable to support themselves in a sitting position without like external supports. So, they're gonna probably have difficulties kind of sitting in the standard classroom chair. So they might have difficulties with this due to things like, they might have like a weakness in their trunk muscles, especially for children who have like muscle wasting conditions, and that can cause problems with the spine. So they would need a different school chair to give them stability and to maximize the use of their upper limbs and their hands as well. So a child who is mobile as well, they may need a chair to help them kind of to transfer independently in and out of this into a standing position. So it's important that staff are, aware of the correct seating position for that pupil, especially if they're, like I said, involved in, transferring and handling. So specialist therapy staff like myself, so occupational therapy or physiotherapists, we can offer advice and help staff to feel more confident with the equipment and what to use and when. But it definitely is required as well that the staff have specialist manual handling training as well. Just to bear in mind also that specialist chairs, they may need to be moved in between the classrooms. So obviously, if the child isn't kind of remaining in the one classroom, yeah, that will need to be considered as well, and it might need to be identified on their child's timetable that the chair needs to go with them. So just to say also that the OT, so myself, we can assess the child's seating needs and make recommendations on what seating is required. And obviously, regular reviews will be needed. Obviously, as the child grows, and as their muscle strength changes and things like that. Okay, so thinking about self-care. So children with physical disabilities may require support with independence tasks such as eating, dressing, and toileting. And factors to consider include things like we said, specialist chairs for lunch. They might have swallowing difficulties, so they might need some assistance or supervision at lunchtime. They might also have a specialist diet, so they might be on, pureed foods due to their swallowing difficulties. They might need adapted cutlery. Yes, they might not be able to use the standard cutlery, so they might need special cutlery, which can be recommended by the occupational therapist as well. Some of the ones we recommend have like a very kind of chunky, thick grasp, so it just means that the children can hold it, especially if their hands are quite weak and things like that. Might need to consider factoring in toileting equipment, so things like a toilet seat, maybe a footstep, and maybe even a rail or a commode and things like that. You may need to also support the children who have delayed with toilet training. And they may need assistance for dressing, which includes things like putting on their splints or helping them put on their supportive shoes and things like that. Okay, And opportunities to develop independence should be embedded through all activities in the mainstream setting. Yeah. So I think sometimes staff might kind of provide almost sometimes too much support to these children because they're having difficulty. So it's really important that you give them those chances and that opportunity to develop those skills as well. So trying not to do it all for them. Obviously, if they're having difficulties, you should help them. But if you know they might be able to learn that skill or develop, and just giving them that chance to do that. Just to say also an important point is it is reasonable for a school to train staff to carry out certain procedures, such as personal care. However, staff can't be kind of compelled to do this if it's not on their contract. So you should recruit staff who will carry out personal care as part of their contract. And this support should be detailed in the education healthcare plan. It's not really reasonable to expect a parent to come into school to provide personal care or to take a child home, for example, to change them, because the school cannot provide that support as well. So it's important that that is in place. Okay, and thinking about fine motor skills. So children with physical disabilities may have difficulties using their hands, which impacts a range of school-based activities. So, for example, the child might have poor hand movement, poor grip, and they might also have like a loss of sensation in their hands. And as a result, that can affect their handwriting, and it can affect their pencil grip as well. So we would recommend things like, adapted writing materials. So things like a slope board. I don't know if you've ever seen that. That can help the pressure on the pencil, and it can help your wrist placement for handwriting and things like that. It can also help children's posture as well. We could consider things like pencil grips, if they're having difficulties holding it with their fingers, or a fingertip ruler as well, if they're having difficulty putting their hand flat on the ruler. You could also consider things like alternatives to writing by using things like ICT, or introducing keyboard skills at an early stage, providing accessible toys, accessible adapted cutlery, special scissors, or voice recognition programs. And do consider a referral to OT for assessment or advice to address any of these difficulties as well. Okay, so thinking about gross motor skills. So children with physical disabilities are likely to require physical activities to be differentiated. So factors to consider include, how do we make PE and dance inclusive for these children? Do you feel that you have the skills equipped to do this? The PE teacher, what are we kind of advising them? Trying to make sure outside play and the hall is accessible for these children. Consider the child's fatigue and endurance levels as well, and consider including them with their peers at break times as well. Sometimes I've seen children, in wheelchairs, and it is quite hard for them to integrate into the playground. The kids are running around, they want to play football, they want to play basketball and things like that. So, there has been times I've seen children kind of isolated by themselves. So it's really important that we try and form, some groups or kind of some friendships for them at lunchtime and things like that, just making sure that they're not left by themselves. I'll go on to discuss some tips now, just in terms of PE and how we can kind of include them in these kind of sports and things like that. Okay. So Senkos and teachers in mainstream schools kind of often ask me, how can they make PE and sports days more inclusive for pupils with physical needs? So you can seek support from your local authority teams, so the specialist teachers, OTs, PTs, we can definitely give you advice on that. There's also charities and organisations which give free advice to schools about inclusive PE lessons. And they also sometimes provide training about modifying games to suit a range of abilities. So I'll name these charities and organisation at the end of the presentation as well, so you can take a look at them after if you like. But just some additional tips as well. So obviously, like I said, you can seek advice from the physio or OT. You can ask the child for ideas on how they can be involved as well. Sometimes the children get a little bit self-conscious as well, and they don't actually want to be involved. But we should try and encourage this as much as we can, because they are kind of being left out a little bit. So we should really try and adapt the lessons if we can. And we can use alternative equipment, so maybe height adjustable basketball nets, lightweight basketballs, hand ribbons and scarves and things like that for dance. You should consider the dignity in changing and showering as well. Select floor activities that everyone can do. So obviously if the child has a physical disability, but they're able to maybe sit themselves upright on the floor, you could do things like yoga. You could do different kind of positions on the floor maybe. So just trying to get them involved that way, rolling a ball, things like that. Swimming is also a great inclusive sport. Some of the swimming centres as well they would have like a hoist and things like that. So the child should, even if the child is in a wheelchair, they should be able to access the pool. And plan sports days well in advance. So this is an anticipatory duty. So we know this is coming. This is going to be a difficult day for them. So just planning for this and thinking about how we can include these children. And seek advice from charities and organisations which give advice to schools about inclusive PE lessons. So yeah, like I said, they'll be on one of the last slides. You can take a look at those as well. Okay, so thinking about children's daily routines. So children with physical disabilities may require an adapted and flexible day, such as additional time to process or respond to instructions. They might need rest breaks or a timeout. I guess, the mental exhaustion or physical fatigue can be quite much for them. So it might be a good idea to perhaps introduce, new concepts in the morning, or things that are going to be most challenging for them. Because I often do find that, these children in the afternoon, they're just so tired and exhausted and they can't really take it in. So yeah, thinking about the most important things and what you'd like the children to learn, and possibly, like I said, doing those in the morning. And obviously then allowing extra time to complete those tasks in the afternoon. You might need to provide opportunities for the children to stretch or change their position from their wheelchair. That's really important as well. That's going to prevent, any kind of stiffness, any kind of contractures, any kind of pressure sores. If the child is sitting in that same position in that one wheelchair the whole day, they really shouldn't. They really should be moving and changing positions, whether that's, stretching on the floor, transferring into a special chair. So yeah, just moving from that same position is really important for them. Some of them might also have like a standing frame in the classroom, so they might need time to spend in that as well. And they also need time for their therapy program. So obviously, if the child is known to OT or physio, or speech and language therapy, they'll likely need intervention scheduled within their day, whether that's 15 minutes a day, twice a week for 10 minutes. They definitely need to have that scheduled into their timetable, and that could include things like stretching, maybe one-on-one speech and language therapy interventions, could be teaching to use cutlery, teaching dressing skills and things like that. And they also need additional time for daily activities such as toileting and lunch. Okay, so thinking about the area of peer interaction. So yeah, children with physical disabilities may need, peer relationships to be supported and developed. So we can do this by providing inclusive opportunities. So things like free flow play. So yeah, really just allowing that, by setting up small groups, small partners, small group situations, to maximize those interactions. By having a playground buddy system. So yeah, that can kind of reduce the isolation and expand the social circles for pupils who find this difficult. So considering lunchtime, considering lunchtime clubs or after school activities. So that can be kind of a chance for children to participate with their peers. And peers are also encouraged, hang on now. Peers are also encouraged to be supportive and informed. So yeah, I guess if the child is using a certain piece of equipment, be open with their peers about their disability and why they need this. I think that can really kind of help, foster acceptance. Um, and we tend to find that, if a child understands a child's disability, they kind of become like allies and really like helping that child and things like that. So yeah, talk about it, be open about it, don't shy away from it, kind of a thing. Okay, so thinking about the area of health and safety. So just pop these up here. Okay, so thinking about, yeah, health and safety precautions in a school. So, any staff member who is involved in caring for a child with a physical disability, they must have access to the child's healthcare plan, and they should or must receive sufficient training to deliver this care required. So if a child with a physical disability, has medical conditions such as epilepsy, that requires specialist training in terms of managing these medical needs. So perhaps administering things like medication, but there also might be a child who requires support with things like personal care, which also requires specialist training for manual handling. So for example, if the child needs to be catheterized or hoisted onto a plinth for changing, these staff need to have, specific like understanding about these specific conditions that they're being asked to deal with. And they do have the right to request further training if they do not feel that they have the kind of the sufficient skills to deliver the care required for these children. Um, just also bear in mind that if your school provides specialist pieces of equipment, so you have things like standing frames, hoists, slings, you need to consider their maintenance as well. So all moving and handling equipment must comply with the LOLR regulation. So it has to be inspected before use and serviced every 6 months as well. And that's the responsibility of the school as well. So do try and keep up with that as well. And staff should have training and be deemed competent in the use of this equipment. And this should be kind of like an essential component of their induction process or kind of their ongoing professional development. Um, okay, so just also bear in mind that some children might have prolonged absences, due to surgery or other medical needs. And this kind of needs to be proactively planned for and managed as well, because they might have, an extended period of time off school. Um, just to say also that children with physical impairments may need it's called a personal emergency evacuation plan. So obviously in case of an emergency, and all staff working with these children or that they need to be aware of that plan. And they also need to consider things like, the emergency exits, and they need to be checked for accessibility, and the fire policy for the building also must be strictly adhered to. So that might mean, not using lifts and making use of safe zones, or using an evacuation chair for that child. So that's a specialized piece of equipment for children who have mobility issues and will not be able to use the stairs or the lift. Okay, thinking about social and emotional mental health for children with physical disabilities. Okay, so some children may have experienced, social exclusion as a result of their condition. So they might have been unable to participate fully in, many everyday activities. They might have watched their peers and siblings develop, using skills that they will never have. So their body also, looks different from their peers. So just be mindful of their self-esteem, and, that this could be quite low, and they might actually have like a poor body image. So these children can be quite prone to, experiencing depression and anxiety. Um, they might show this in a variety of ways. So that could be things like they might withdraw, they might have changes in their appetite, they might have like a lack of interest in school or for their performance. They don't really care. Um, so yeah, I guess just, be aware of this possibility and kind of try to closely monitor that and the impact of that on the child. And you know, if you are kind of observing these behaviors over a long period of time, it would be worth, you know, discussing with the parents the possibility of seeking professional advice. Um, you know, in saying that as well, though, I feel like children who are having these difficulties, they often kind of seek support from those they feel comfortable with at school. So I guess, you know, it's important for, you know, school staff to be aware of that and provide kind of opportunities to enhance the child's self-esteem. So you could do that by doing things like you know, using positive disabled role models in teaching. So that could be things like you know, using books that have pictures of children who are in a wheelchair. And you might also like have a day perhaps of like celebrating the Paralympics, and perhaps even, you know, inviting guest speakers who might have a physical disability, or by like show and tell activities. So for example, maybe explaining what a splint is or a piece of their equipment or things like that. Okay, so this is just the list of the charities and the organisations which provide advice to schools about inclusive PE. I will send you guys a copy of this presentation, so you don't need to take them down now, but just so you're aware that they're there. Yeah, there's ones like Whiz Kids, that's quite a good one for children who are in wheelchairs. They also offer wheelchair training as well. So if the child is new to a wheelchair, you know, having difficulties kind of maneuvering around the school and things like that, they actually can come to the school and offer training with that as well. But yeah, there's quite a few there, so you can have a look in your own time there and see if your school would benefit from any of those. And yeah, I guess we're finished now. So if you want to ask any questions, feel free to ask any. And if not, like I said, I'll send the presentation to you guys after, so you can have a copy of that as well. Do you have any questions you want to ask? You can pop them in the chat if you like. Oh, thank you guys. Thanks. Yeah, hope you enjoyed the training. Our child won't be able to access the dining room. Okay. Is that due to environmental issues like steps or something, or is it due to the seating, or what exactly is that because of?
Hi, sorry.
Yes.
Is
Yeah.
that all right if I talk to you a little bit quicker?
Go for it. Yeah, definitely.
So he, I'm not sure of his exact condition yet, but he can't walk. He has a little, like a walking frame on wheels, which he can use, but it's very, very slow. Our dining room is upstairs and we don't have a lift or anything. So that's the problem with the dining room. And then my other worry is, by the time he gets to PE, dance, music, playtime, you know, it will be over because he moves very slowly in it.
Because he's so
I don't know how we'd address those sort of issues.
Yeah, that can be. Does he ever use a wheelchair, or does he always just walk with the frame?
He's coming to us next year. My understanding is no, it's just a walking frame.
Okay, it's just a walking frame. Yeah. Yeah, I this is the thing, like, because obviously they need extra time. They can miss out on a few lessons because they take time with their mobility and things like that. So yeah, that's just something to bear in mind. I guess for the feed for the dining hall, unless you kind of make any adaptations, you know, so whether that's like a lift or a stair lift or something like that, he won't be able to get up there, because you said he can't access the stair. He can't do stairs. Is that right? He has to have.
Yes, that's correct. So I mean, what we're thinking is that he'll just have to have his lunch brought downstairs for him. But I'm conscious that that is not ideal, because then he's not with his peers and so on.
Yeah, that's it. So, I mean, we don't really want him to be alone. So if there was maybe like a small group of children that could join him, that would obviously be great. But yeah, I mean, I wonder if he's known to an OT. Maybe the OT could come into the school and do a bit of an assessment and make any recommendations for that. There might be something else that they can advise. Do you know if he's known to the occupational therapist?
Yes, I'm sure that he is. So
Okay, yeah, could be a good idea just to get them in and take a look and see what other things could be
fine.
suggested. And like I said, if he is missing a lot of class, it might be a good idea. I think someone just posted in the chat as well, just to, if he does have a wheelchair, just to wheel him. If he's taking a long time, and you said that he's missing all the lesson, then
Yes.
just to help with that. But obviously we want him to still walk, obviously he can, but maybe even
But
if it's just
just
for
for
a few
these
lessons.
situations. Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. I think that's it, guys, unless anyone else has any questions. Informative and good tips. I'm very fortunate to have lift and ramp. Yeah, that definitely helps. Yeah, it really, really does. It's really difficult when you don't, and it can take so long to get all of these things installed. So, yeah, it does really help. Thank you guys so much for joining. My email, if anyone needs to email me, I should have actually put my email at the end of the presentation, but my name's Shauna. I'll put it at the end of the presentation actually before I send it. If anyone's got any further questions, you can definitely ask me. But yeah, I'm really glad that you found it informative and helpful. That's really great. Someone else is just typing there to see if anyone's got a last question. Equipment requests take a long time to get. Yeah, they do take a very long time, and also funding as well is a big thing. It depends on the cost. I think it's now, if the equipment is over £2,000, the local authority, they can support you with that. But I think if it's under £2,000 now, like let's say, for example, a seat, I think the school are expected to pay for that through their own budget. I'm pretty sure that's the way now anyway. But yeah, just so you're aware of that as well. But yeah, definitely get in those equipment requests as soon as possible. Okay, thank you guys for joining. Bye, take care. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you, bye-bye.